Okay, hey everyone, and welcome back to the House Hack podcast. Super excited to have you joining us today. Our guest today is Lee Bovington. So, Lee is the current EMEA Territory Loss Prevention Manager at Nike, where he focuses on minimizing losses and maximizing profits for the retail business across brick and mortar and e commerce. Having started his career within the police force and progressed with purpose within loss prevention since then, he's acquired a wealth of experience within leadership that has enabled him to improve business, personal, and team performances. You can find Lee on LinkedIn, and super excited to have him on today. How you doing, Lee?
Really good, gents. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Super excited to get into this chat. So we're going to be focusing on your journey, talking about your lessons, your why, how you got to where you are today. But I think our first question is going to talk about where you are now and really just ask, what is loss prevention?
Sure. Loss prevention in my current position is pretty straightforward. We have a very clear mission statement in which myself and all of the team abide by. And it's very, very simple in that we are here to minimize financial loss to the business and reduce our exposure to risk at all levels. And by having the mission statement is very, very clear and abundant to all of our stakeholders what we do and what we don't do, which sometimes in the loss prevention world can be lost in translation, which is why it's so important to have a very clear, very structured mission statement that we continue to prophesize from and refer to in every conversation that we have with stakeholders in order to maximize the performance from our team and from our function.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for that, Lee. That's a really good insight into what you do and how that mission plays a really important role. I think when I was looking at your background, one of the elements that I thought was really interesting was starting off in the police force. How did you find yourself coming across to retail? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it just a career transition that you had at some point and didn't really know what the next step was going to be?
Yeah, so it was a big career transition, and the transition isn't easy. So I'm not going to pretend here, speaking to you both, that it's an easy transition, because it isn't. Especially if you'd spent such a long time in the police that I had, just over 10 years. But I was really lucky, I guess, because when I moved over to what I would describe as the real world, no disrespect to the police service, I was lucky because the retailer that I worked for really understood the transferable skills that I had and what value I could bring into their workplace. Because it's quite siloed in the police, because at the time I was one of 30,000 police officers in London, and I didn't really know what skills I had. I knew that I wanted to change, but I didn't really, or couldn't label the skills that I had, because the only ever full-time experience I had in employment was in the police. But when I went to JD Sports, the transition I found was incredibly smooth and incredibly accommodating and welcoming, and it melted quite easily into my role in JD, which was a regional loss control manager. So I found that transition pleasantly surprising and pleasantly seamless.
Nice, awesome. And you spoke there a little bit about the roles or the skills that could be transferable. When you did look internally to find out what those were, what did you discover that could be transferred to loss prevention, and how did it help you in that new role?
Yeah, so two big things that I looking back then, I always knew that I had, but I didn't know what the label was. And I'm still, you don't lose those skills, you just enhance those skills to the present day. The first one I would say is communication, is in every form, how to communicate appropriately at all levels in order to achieve the right amount of impact. It's about flexing that style. And the second one was quite simply about getting things done. and I always am and always have been a fairly driven person, if I've got a hunger inside of me to fix or get things done, that's a really good trait to have. In the police service, I guess you would always look to seek the truth, and you would always look to seek justice for your victims of crime at whatever level. And I always have that in my DNA, I guess. Didn't know at the time, but I would always have that in my DNA to try to solve, to try to fix, to try to win the race, to try to get to the end. And that really helped me in JD and to the present day, just having that hunger inside to try to reach the best resolution that you can. So you can look back on your work and say, you know what, I tried my best. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I really gave everything that I could in order to achieve that goal. So, and that's the same as I operate now as well. So that really helped.
And when you were first making that transition, do you think that hunger was one of the driving forces behind making that change, that career transition, that kind of desire to fix, to have an impact?
Yes, I would say yes, quite simply. And I would say through the recruitment process, I assume now that the recruiter saw that inside me. And again, that's by the questions that they ask and the design of the questions. And they saw that inside me, that I wasn't there just to, kind of do a half job or give them kind of 50% commitment. My role there was to try to achieve. And in the retail world, in loss control, you had a target, so you had numbers, you had data that you could strive towards. So you could see the impact of your output in the workplace, how it ultimately manifested into a number. So I could see how much push would achieve, how much standoff would achieve, how much strong communication, how much softer communication. I could see that. So I could, and if you measured it, I think in JD, we was measured in 3 months increments. So I could see if I pushed there, what it would achieve. So that gave me an understanding on reflection. Actually, the ingredients is sound. The formula is good to achieve those results. So it was pretty straightforward. And, I was successful, and I was part of a machine, but I was successful in those stages to really understand the style of person that I wanted to be, and the style of communicator that I wanted to communicate with the team with in order to get those required results.
Nice. So you speak there, I think, really clearly about the way of measuring even soft skills in the workplace and the way of seeing their results through predetermined KPIs. I think that's really, really interesting. How do you bring that to your current role with managing people? And in what way do you find that it makes the role of management really meaningful to you?
Yeah, again, a really good question. And there isn't a number attributed to how you improve an individual's soft skills and their performance. But I've always been true to the people that I work with. I would never describe that they work for me. I would describe it as a working with relationship, because that's the kind of style that I lead. And my acid test of my own personal success as a leader of people is how they achieve their own professional and personal goals. Yes, it's about KPIs. Yes, it's about driving performance, which is the bread and butter of business. But I would always see great achievement and accolade in them if they achieve, if they develop, if they move on, if they go to other departments, if they lead a team, if they can replace me as a leader as well. That's something that, that's natural, and nobody should shy away from that. In terms of the people that I recruit, as I've learned over the years, should be the person that replaces me. Geographically pending, obviously, but that person should be replacing me, and I shouldn't be too proud to want that to happen, because that means that they've developed and they've achieved, and there is no boundaries or silos to the goals that they want to achieve. And if they have dreams and ambitions, it's my job as a leader to light the way, is to show them the light. And that's a that's a phrase that we use in some companies, where I did show them that this isn't just about a one-dimensional approach to business. If you've got ambition, if you've got drive, if you've got talent, you can do whatever you want across any business. And I've always held strong to that belief. But coming from the police, I didn't manage a team, so I didn't see that skill inside me. Moving from JD to other businesses, that started to resonate, that started to open up. So that's a nice skill to have. But it's nice to see the team develop. So one of my biggest accolades is seeing people move within business, and it's always a nice proud moment to see that, for me to accept that I was a part of that person's development, and I was a part of that person achieving their goals and becoming more rounded in whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah, no, I can see that you've got a really personal approach to management and to bringing people along with you and kind of creating that journey. But just, I wonder if there's any particular experiences across your career. You mentioned you started out at JD and now, of course, at Nike, but there are other moves in there as well. Are there any key experiences that have led to that being your personal style of leadership and of management, or is it just progress, compound over time?
I guess we learn by experience. And when I was in JD, I always wanted to progress and manage a group of people, and then move into people management in TJX Europe, which is at the time was TK Maxx and HomeSense. That enabled me and gave me the opportunity to manage people, and it was in at the deep end, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to literally be stood in front of a group of people, and I was in charge, not because of the power, because that gave me, but it gave me responsibility to be their developmental mentors, and for me to be almost a dream enabler for these groups of people. And I learned that from my own experiences, from my line managers, that was always positive, and I learned that. But to be able to be in an environment where I was a leader and they looked to me for advice, put me under a nice amount of pressure, to be honest, because that made me help them and develop them in their roles.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think that development of other people as a leader, not as a manager, is really, really interesting, and looking forward to deep diving into that into a bit more detail in a few minutes. But quickly on the responsibility that you say that you really enjoyed and thrive within, I guess with taking on responsibility also has negative as well as positive outcomes. You have to bear both the good and the bad. Were there any mistakes you made on that journey, and how did you learn from it?
Yeah, I'll give some thought to mistakes, but I would say always it starts with trust. So I would always, and again, this is no just disrespect to anybody that's gone before me, because everyone's on their own personal journeys, but there would always be an element of trust. So if I was to walk into literally a new room with a new team in front of me, there would always be a bit of apprehension from the team, a little bit of, does he really want to do these things, or is he just saying it? Is he really invested in my development as a person, or is he just reading it off a corporate script? And there'd always be those trust obstacles, always, and there was always being a sense of undoing. Okay, so you've got that that knot that you just need to slowly and methodically undo, and when that person sees that you are true to your word, and you are fair but you're firm at the same time, and you do treat everybody in the same respectful manner, and you are true to your word, and you will invest in them as a person, that breaks down a lot of barriers. And I would always, I know it sounds an old cliche, but I would always treat people how I would expect to be treated myself. And we learn from other people that we've worked for and worked with in order to formulate your own personal style. So that's what's helped me in those particular scenarios.
Cool. So now I think we're kind of transitioning out of that story piece at the beginning into diving into the topic at the top that we mentioned is more about kind of coaching within the workplace and that specific management. We've touched on it already, but really to pick up on it straight away, what role does coaching play in building an effective team, and perhaps what does coaching mean in that kind of workplace context?
Yeah, it's everything. In simple terms, it's everything. In take yourself outside of the business environment, it's everything. Anyone can point, anyone can poke, anyone can assess or validate. Anyone can do that, in my opinion. But it's to be a patient, sometimes robust, rounded coach makes a difference, because that creates longevity. That's future proof if it's done in the most effective way that person can do at the time, because that then creates that team, because then you are literally transferring your thought process and your skills and your awareness and your understanding. You're literally, or physically rather, passing that baton to that individual so they understand. And there's some obvious cliches such as the why. You always have to explain the principle of what you're trying to deliver, because otherwise it will never land. It will never sink. I've made those mistakes in the past, and I learned from those mistakes where sometimes I haven't asked why. Yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. Yeah, I've got it. Lee's going to fix this. Don't worry, it'll be done, etc. If I don't ask the why, it's almost a leap of faith as to whether I actually understand what the message is of me that my line manager or someone else wants to be delivered. So very, very conscious of that fact. And sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. All those cliches, because it's so important to make sure that when that person or persons leave your presence, they completely understand. They've seen the picture. It's like the matrix has kind of worked itself out. They understand now what you're trying to ask them to achieve and why, because they can then describe it to another person, so it doesn't get lost in translation, so that it remains true all the way down through the process. And that's massively important. But yeah, coaching per se should be a fairly straightforward skill. I'm lucky enough to coach a football team, and it's pretty transferable skills, right? It is the same. You tell, you show again, and then they run off and execute literally, and then you can stop and coach at the same time. And when it comes to a match day, you're literally just encouraging from the sideline. There shouldn't be any real instruction or positional changes or formations that you agree from the start. That should just be the easy part. So in business, it's my role to coach, to have the right environment, to show them physically. I'm very much a visual learner, to show them visually what it actually looks like, to bring them on that brainstorming journey, for everybody to be comfortable in asking questions, because it's not just pointing finger manager led. This is about leader led instructions, and it's really important that people feel comfortable to be able to ask questions. And to be able to be comfortable to challenge, to say, you know what, Lee, I think we should try and do something quite different, because sometimes I'm not always right. Sometimes I would do that on purpose to provoke the conversation, but sometimes I may have an idea that in reality, when we walk through the process, isn't actually going to work. So it's important for me to be cognizant of that and listen to the audience, because they're the people in on the front line. They're the people that know exactly how it works. So it's important that they see me as that equal partner on that journey, and I just steer them to the conclusion or solution that we're trying to get towards.
Nice. That was, I think, really good overview of coaching. And I think underlying the whole of that, your message there was explain the why and have them understand it and believe in it. My question in that area would be, what if they don't believe in your why? And what if the person doesn't align with the organizational why? How would you coach or mentor them to that viewpoint? Or would you try and translate the why into something completely different?
Yeah, and there's many conversations I've had, and let's say an example, it's in a meeting environment where that person disagrees, whether that just be a militant disagree or they just don't understand. It's important that I explain in a different way, because there may be some cultural challenges, or there may be some language or translation challenges in that conversation, especially with a European role, which I have at the moment. So it's important to recognise that, pause, take a breath, try to explain it in a different way. Engage the other teammates in helping that individual understand. So it's not just me literally stood in front of an audience, trying to cascade. And then if that doesn't work, simple things, I would speak to them on a one-to-one basis and try to get them to understand it differently in the most simplistic way that I could. Reach out to other stakeholders to see if there was another way to speed reach that person so that they could understand it from a different angle. And sometimes it depends on what the message is. If it's a strong business message, I just need to understand, is there something behind this? Is there something deeper that's kind of niggling at them that makes them just not want to abide by any business instruction? Is there something historic? Do I need to unravel that? And that's something, almost counsel that. Do I need to counsel that conversation to really understand the core of what could be this? Because sometimes it isn't the topic. There was a historical core that happened a month ago, 2 years ago, 3 weeks ago, that's made that individual possibly not want to follow the particular direction that they're going on.
Something that I think we're kind of coming to is when you have that conflict, that disagreement, maybe there is a historical challenge or language barrier. There's lots of different contributions to some potential conflict. But where's the line? And I guess it's personal style as well. But where's the line between coaching on a level of understanding, bringing people with you, and perhaps being that more disciplined figure?
Yeah, sure. And ultimately, we need to face into that. We need to face into it where at some point you've exhausted all your options. So you have exhausted all of the tools that are available to you to try to ensure that individual understands and or accepts the message. And that's about hard conversations, and it's just about facing into those conversations. Because if you don't, the most important thing to me is my team sees that I don't, and that has a detrimental and negative effect. So they could see me as a little bit flaky, not as strong as I should be, and I would inwardly look at that as well, being a reflector. So there comes to a point where it's just got to be done, and it's about having those. It's about being bold and having those conversations face to face, not over the phone, not in an email, because that's cheating in my opinion. You have those conversations face to face with someone, because if it's important to have, it needs to be a personal conversation, and just facing into it, having the conversations that this has to be done. This isn't up for debate. This isn't something that we can keep debating. This is a business instruction or an instruction from me, but it's also being sensitive to it as well. So it's not about hitting someone over the head to deliver the particular topic. It's about making sure that they understand that I am being fair, but also I'm being consistent. So I'm not treating them in any other different way as to which I would treat their colleagues, for example, if it was the same subject, because I would never, I never cease to acknowledge the fact that people talk to people, teammates talk to teammates, and that's natural. I'd never try and stop that. So I would always ensure that I am firm, and I would always be fair in the approach. So I give people as much opportunity as I can to see the light, fall in line. But if they don't, then I'm fair in, this isn't up for debate. This just has to be delivered, and I will be with you all the way. So I'll still have, an arm around their shoulder to help them deliver. And there will always be that time when that person rings you and they say, I get it now, I understand it now. So we can almost then revisit the original conversation to try to understand what they didn't understand in the first place. And there could be a ton of reasons for that. It could be a personal reason that they was going through a particular turmoil in their life that they didn't feel comfortable in speaking to me about, that made them behave or think in a different way. That's just life.
Yeah, I think that would be my follow-up on, again, the line between the coaching as the leader within the workplace, that conversation, but also on the personal side, particularly in a world of remote work, even there, just saying you'd have that conversation face to face. You can't have many conversations face to face at the moment. And that kind of coaching, does that translate to personal life as well? There's a kind of trend or theme, or certainly growing expectation of employees, of workers, to bring their whole selves to work. Does that coaching apply to that as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you make a really good point. And it's about being sincere, in my view, as a coach. It's about being plausible. It's about people believing in the style and trust. And I wrote trust down here on big letters on my pad. It's about people trusting that I'm here for them genuinely, not just because I work for X organization. So there's more of an emphasis on being sincere. So sincere, when I mean, for example, is instead of saying to them on a classic one-to-one, for example, did you have a nice weekend? Yes. What did you do? Not much. That kind of stuff. It's what resonates with me. This is what I learned from my leader. My leader, my current leader, said to me on one of my first one-to-ones, Lee, how are you feeling? Straight away for me, that was a mic drop moment, because that just hit all of my nerves in a positive way, because that showed me, number one, he was interested in how I felt, not just what did I watch over the weekend or what football match did I go to. So it's important that when I speak to my team, I am purposefully vested in them as people first. Yes, they work for an organization, and yes, that organization pays the mortgage, but I need to demonstrate to them that I am personally invested in them as people, by being genuine, by giving them space to answer, by using those silences in conversation, and enable them to fill those silence with material that they think is relevant. And also being humble and sharing my own personal, it's not about sharing your deepest, darkest, but it's also about sharing some experiences to show those individuals, what, there's some give and take here. There's a crossover. This guy's all right. He's actually quite human. He's actually quite nice. He's there for me. And it's when they get that trust, that makes a ton of difference.
I think that's really, really important. I think from what you're saying, I'm hearing that the emotions, the feeling, the person really behind the role is equally as important as the role, the outcome, the doing itself. So feelings also plays a part in doing. In your experience, or more broadly, what have you seen, or how has this translated into other managers that you've worked alongside or for? Do you feel that they have been leaders themselves that care about the feelings of others as well as what they do? Or have they led more with the results-based approach? And if they haven't been that way inclined, how can they become more feeling orientated and more caring and developing that key word trust with their employees?
Yeah, it's a good point. I've seen both. I'm lucky enough to have worked in various different organisations, including the police service. So I've seen a lot. I've seen kind of the hard-nosed approach, the old-fashioned, bang on the table. You will do what I said. Why is that? Because I'm the boss. I've seen that, and I've felt that. And I know what it feels like. So I've seen that approach. But I've also seen amazing leaders, like incredible kind of jaw-dropping leaders that explain the vision so articulately. It's painful in the way that they explain the vision. It's excellent. So you can literally view the roadmap from their eyes, and it exudes out of their eyes. That's powerful to see, and that's a real skill. And that then enables the team to just, yeah, get it. Let's come along on that journey because it makes sense. We really get it. But like I say, I've seen leaders that don't do that, and yes, that may achieve a result. Yes, that may achieve a number. But guess what? You look at the attrition of that team, it may also impact the attrition of that team. And when that person comes home from work and they, how's your day, and you speak to your partners and stuff, I would like that conversation to be positive somewhat, not just, just he made me do this other thing and he was really heavy on me and he didn't really explain, he just told me to do all that kind of stuff, because that's not a nice feeling. I've been there, and I've, it's not my tale of woe, but I've learned from those experiences, because I know how belittling sometimes that makes you feel. And it may achieve the result in the moment, but guess what? People then leave. And there's that phrase that's out there, is people leave because of bosses. How true that is, and it's not my position to say, but people may leave just because of bosses, not because of pay or compensation or the company car or the business that they work for. It's because the way that person made them feel. If that person makes them feel belittled or degraded or not important or restricted in their development, that's not a nice feeling to have. And I guess it depends on the cultures and values of particular businesses. Most businesses have cultures and values, comma, are they accurate? Are they real? Do we all lead by example? And I'm lucky to work for a business like Nike, where they are true, they are powerful. People do, on the whole, lead by example, and that resonates with me, and it ticks all of my boxes, because that then helps me to become that natural leader with my team. And ultimately, my goal is to build a team of leaders. So if they want to, maybe not everyone wants to, that's absolutely fine. If they have ambition and they are talented in a certain field, then they can, ride off into the sunset and go on to their next step, be it with the organization. Ideally, sometimes people go outside of the organization to come back in, which is equally okay.
Yeah, I think that final point there on, it's almost building someone's career rather than their journey with the organization itself. But how does that play into the business need to retain people and the demand to have people there in the long term? If they're going to invest so much time, say, into this coaching, into the learning and development, into everything that the employees had out of them, how would they see the ROI of that if they're then going to move on to a new role and then maybe come back that they can't really guarantee on the financial forecast?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough decision. And I've been in conversation with individuals in different organizations where they kind of feel that they come to a dead end. So they've been in the business for X years. They feel that they've done everything there is to do. They can't see any progression through any kind of vertical move. They kind of feel stuck, and every day is Groundhog Day. And my advice to those individuals is always try to stick at it. Okay, so business changes in waves. So the direction of business, the organizational structure tends to change in waves, and you kind of get to feel this wave progression in certain businesses. Sometimes it's every 3 years, sometimes every 5 years, approximately. And my advice would always be stick with it, but let's see what else we can do with you within the business itself. So it may not always be, let's just look at solely loss prevention. It may well be that they move into a store operations role. It may well be that they move into more of an e-com analytical role. Whatever kind of serves their purpose and ticks the box of that particular development area, it's important to keep exploring that, but also to seek counsel with other parts of the organization to explain to them, I've got a really talented person in the business. They're kind of a little bit dismayed. There's nothing for us at the moment. Can they develop into your function? Can they have a 6-month assignment into your function, or a 9-month assignment into your function? How can we re-energize them? Sometimes that's difficult, but again, in my current organization, that should be relatively straightforward, because Nike is a business that's unsiloed, so you can see the landscape completely across the business. So this isn't about LP and LP forever. This is about, look, you are in the business, you're a key part of that organization and that machine. You can move into anything else that you want. The world is literally your oyster, literally, in every sense. So it's about me understanding that business, not being too proud to want to retain that skill in my business, and allowing that individual to move across different parts of the business. And that's born, I would say, wholly out of my understanding of how that business machine works and my network of people that I partner with, and being very honest about that. So
yeah, so the follow-up with that would be, do you think that overarching perspective that you have across the business of not wanting to retain that talent because you can see the different aspects of the business, and LP is not unique in that way, but it has a lot of visibility across such a big organization in that way, and perhaps that's something that not other departments have. And so would you say that perspective of allowing talent to go across, to have those secondments, to take those different roles up in the organization, is that because of the visibility you have, or is that something that's instilled as part of the culture at Nike?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. Not to sit on the fence, but I think it's generally a bit of both. If I've got access to and a broad knowledge of how the business works, at a palatable kind of level, then it would naturally work. I think one of the analogies is, if I've got a goal scorer in my team of a football team, and the goal scorer normally scores 30 goals a season, but for whatever reason he's kind of lost his mojo and he's only scoring 10 a season, maybe if he moves to another team, he can bring back that energy and bring back that mojo and deliver a different or a better style of service for that individual. Here's another football analogy where teams put players out on loan. Why do they do that? To get them experience, to make them fitter, to make them more agile, to harden them up a little bit. Why not use that analogy in business and move people across different functions for a variety of different skills, to then, if and when they then come back to you, they've got much more experience, they've been coached in a different way, they've got much better skills, or they've got new skills, or they've lost some bad habits and they've honed in on their developmental areas. So that's powerful to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really interesting point, more broadly, about nurturing your best talent and seeing the way that it'll come back to you in the long term. I've got a quick thought though for you on the kind of progression of the rising stars, the best talent that's coming through the organization. What if, or if they can at all, can they ask too soon? Can they demand too much of you too early and ask for promotions across the organization before they're ready, before you think they can take that leap? And when that comes up in conversation, do you back them or do you back yourself, even when you know they're good, but maybe they're not quite good enough yet?
Yeah, I would always look at talent in the business in the most sincere ways, and that isn't always around actual days and hours and months and years and weeks in their current role. It's, have they got the hunger? Do they want to develop? Tick, yes. Okay, so what skills have they got, and how can they demonstrate to me that if they were to go to the next level, then they would make that jump in a seamless way. So it's my role to expose them to that world as much as I can. Doesn't matter whether they're 6 months in the role, a year in the role, 2 years in the role, if I see that hunger and I see that they can achieve, and they've dipped their toe in the water, and it is a success, and they have learned from it, and they are asking me a ton of questions: what, how, why, where, when, etc. That's good. That's a good place to be, and I want that. I want someone to knock on my door and say, I'm ready to play now. Put me in the first team. I'm ready now. And okay, so let's look how you've trained. Let's look how you performed. Let's look how your fitness is. Let's look how your agility is. Let's look how your position in the team. Tick, 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 tick. Great. I will then, sounds a bit hierarchical. I will then allow them to move into that next area, but I will always be a coach. So I will always be in contact with them to see how they are, to see how they're feeling, to see how they're developing, to share my experiences. So they would never be there on their own in that world, for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I think that part of seeing or being with them beyond how they move into the next role, and almost looking back on the evidence to back up their claim. So when they come and knock on the door and say, hey, look, I'm ready, it's sitting down, drawing out the reports, looking at how they performed in the last season, how many goals they scored, how many tackles they made, and seeing, okay, great, you've proven it. You haven't just said it, you've also done it. And I think that's a really, really interesting part. And it probably also leads quite nicely into my next question on the wider role of coaching and how it can be developed. So with coaching in the workplace, what does the future of it look like to you?
More coaches, more sincere, genuine coaches of people, less managers. And I would describe myself as more of a leader and a coach than a manager. Like I said previously, anyone can manage, anyone can point, anyone can send a pointy email. It may fix that issue in the time, but to coach is a nice skill to have, which is obviously an understatement. But yeah, I would say the future are more coaches, more cross-functional movements, so that people can see that, wow, that person was in that role. I thought they was always loss prevention, and then they've come into my department and they've set the world on fire. It's that's the important part. So, and it's a continual erosion, I think, in a positive way, of the business mentality to encourage leaders, to encourage coaching, to encourage development, to not want to keep all of your toys to yourself just because it's making you look amazing as a leader and your numbers are incredible. Sometimes your numbers may not be incredible because you are on that journey of coaching with your team, but you know that I know personally that if I concentrate on the team, if I get into the detail of the tactics and have those conversations, good, bad, and indifferent, the numbers will just take care of themselves. And that's what I've seen in the organizations that I've been involved is I used to be so obsessed sometimes by the number, and then sometimes take my eye off the person that's delivering the number. Flip that on its head, focus on the people, focus on describing the mission, explaining it to them in detail, talking them through the types of conversations, really getting into the detail of the essence of coaching. The numbers will then just naturally flow and naturally take care of themselves. And sometimes it's a long process, sometimes it's a short process, but it's about being confident in what you do. And there's many stories that I've been involved in organizations where, I've walked into a tough environment with a team that's finding it hard to adhere to what the business direction is. So sometimes you have to just get your finger and press a big pause button and just take that team on that journey. Put your arm around people. Some people stay, some people impulsively want to leave. That's okay. If they can't see that message, people may just impulsively want to leave. But then you start to build your team, and then you start to build that legacy of improvement. And then when you leave that department or that function or that area or that geography, the team is just ticking over, and it's just ticking over like a well-oiled machine, and it doesn't need any coaching sessions 3 times a week, for example. It doesn't need to go on the AstroTurf 3 times a week. You can just go once, then you can just go to your match because it works and everyone gets it.
It's more efficient, and it kind of, the legacy almost pays for itself over that time period when you kind of have that perspective, because it just naturally evolves and makes sense.
Yeah.
But one way that I'd flip that slightly, again, thinking about the future of coaching in the workplace, more coaches, less managers. On the flip side, as an early career, as a rising star, as somebody in that machine, how can you help your managers to become better coaches? How can you flip it and take them on a journey a little bit as well?
Lead by example. Another cliche, sorry. Lead by example. And I learned this in my TK Max days. I worked with an amazing district manager who wasn't in loss prevention, but we partnered. And he told me, and I always remember this, he said to me, behavior breeds behavior. Really simple, right? So annoyingly simple, but so true, because it does. So it's about me consistently being true to how I want to be, and then people will naturally see it. Because if they then see a chink of light between different styles and I'm not actually sincere to it, that will naturally show me up as a fake, and that will be exploited. So it's being true to yourself and being sincere and leading by example. But yeah, behavior breeds behavior, and that's a big lesson that I learned in a previous organization, because it's so true, and it's important, because if you then start to build coaches, start to build leaders, then the managers will have no alternative but to become coaches, or maybe do something different, because then they would make themselves be isolated, and then the business would see them as such, and then the employees in that particular team would see them as such.
So with this kind of future direction of cross-functional teams and movement between employees across organizational departments, and having more coaches, less managers that lead by example, how can we reach that future of the workplace? How can we, both from an employee perspective and employer perspective, how can we allocate the right resources to make that happen, really, and make that a natural reality?
Yeah, I would say is be more generalists. So just be great communicators, be great thinkers, be great questioners, be general. You don't have to pin all of your colors to the mast and say, I just want to do this. Just be, just relax, just drop your shoulders, just, put your hands by your side, and just be a generally good person and a generally good communicator, and always ask a ton of questions in whatever kind of role that you are, to gain that full understanding. And don't pigeonhole yourself. So don't just think I'm going to be in this role for the next 5 years. Always have your eyes wide open. So remove your blinkers. Try to understand the business direction and how the business machine works. Just be generally good. Just be nice. Follow those processes. Embrace the values. Embrace the cultures. Learn from your leaders, and then good things will happen. And I've seen it many a time. And be resilient. Don't expect it to happen the next day. Just be resilient. Just keep going. Just keep pushing forward. Keep pushing forward, because businesses go, like I said, go through developmental changes and organizational changes and peaks and troughs, all of that stuff. But my advice is, when the going does get tough, just keep facing into it. Just keep driving forward. Just keep, even if it's just a millimeter, just keep driving forward. And then eventually good things will happen. And then you can look back and just say to yourself, wow, I learned a ton there. And look at me now, and it's future-proofed.
Nice. No, I love that. There's some really, really good advice in there. And I think what we've spoken about today, you mentioned it a couple of times, there's a lot of that cliche in there. And I think the point to hammer home is cliche often works. That's why people repeat it and rephrase it and reframe it and say it in their own ways, because it works. But I'd follow up with that kind of final question to think about what is maybe the one thing or the couple of things that, as you're building your own legacy, and we always try focus shorter term rather than end goal. So maybe the next 2 or 3 years, what's that legacy piece for you? What are you really focusing on?
Team. So it's not about me. It's about the purple. It's about the people that work with me. So it's not about Lee's success. It's about my legacy is the team that work with me, where they've come from, understanding what that was, and where they're going to with a purpose. And hopefully those individuals developing in a positive way, in a way that benefits them personally, but also benefits the business at the same time. So for me, it's just team, pure and simple.
Team. Yeah, I love that. Really, really good way to wrap up the episode today. I think we've spoken a lot about leadership, coaching, management, finding your own style, a lot of different things, the importance of communication towards the end there as well. And so all that remains is for everyone listening to just let us know on our socials, on LinkedIn primarily, what do you think about coaching in the workplace? What about this perspective from Lee? Just let us know, and you can find Lee on LinkedIn as well. So thanks so much for joining us today, Lee. Really, really great chat.
Loved it. Thanks for your time.